Using an assessment tool in the hiring process to make better decisions is a good practice. There are two types of tools, ipsative and normative. I'll explain the difference and which one is best to use for hiring. Hello, I'm Stephen Goldberg of Optimist Performance, bringing you practical tips and ideas on leadership, team development, and employee performance in the workplace. Hiring is a tricky situation. Making decisions on who is the best candidate is not always easy, and that's why assessment tools can play a great role in selecting the right person for the job. And as I mentioned in many of my videos, performance starts with having the right person in the job. You don't want to spend time training someone who ultimately doesn't fit the role. And that's where assessment tools and the difference between the two, one is ipsative and the other normative, comes into play. Basically, the difference is the ipsative type of tool measures the person against themselves or other people, whereas the normative tool measures people against a performance model designed for the job. There are many popular ipsative tools, such as the Myers-Briggs, probably one of the most famous. The PI, or predictive index, is another very well-known tool. And then you have the normative types, like the PXT Select, which I sell. Now, I also sell a disk-based ipsative tool, but for hiring, it's not recommended to use an ipsative tool, especially on its own. It's okay if you use it combined with a normative tool. The difference is that you are measuring the person against a specific benchmark or performance model that is relative to the job. What else I like about the normative tool, well, the PXT Select, which I'm very familiar with, is that it's a total person tool. It measures not only the behavior, personality, but also cognitive part, the thinking style, numerical skill, and also the occupational interest. There are 6 occupational interests. So there's specific qualities or behavioral traits and also thinking style and interest that are most important for the job. And you want to be able to compare the results of the person with that performance model. Whereas the ipsative one is comparing them against themselves and other people, and the report is relative to that. Another thing is generally the ipsative tool doesn't have a way to measure how honest the person or frank they were when they answered the questions, whereas the normative tool like the PXT Select, there's a distortion scale which will tell you, can you rely on the results from the assessment? There may be also that built into some tools, but I'm not aware of that, so that's something to look out for. Ipsative tools are best used to understand the person, used in coaching, maybe in teamwork situations. You can create exchanges with people, but it's much more general. Whereas the normative tool can also be used for coaching, but it's relative to the requirements for the job. And so I find it a much more complete tool, and thus this is the one I use for hiring. Now, of course, there's other assessments or tests that you can incorporate as well, like skill testing, which I do recommend for specific jobs, or actually for any job. I mean, even a manual labor job, you can do skill testing for things like knowledge and awareness about safety. You can do attitude testing as well, because when people come to an interview, they present the best version of themselves, and what's buried beneath you maybe want to find out, and certain tools can help you flush that out and see what's below the surface, as they say. So keep in mind that if you're looking for a tool to use for hiring itself, you want to look for a normative tool and one that matches somebody to a performance model. I do offer that tool. I do offer a free test run for qualified companies. So if you're interested, there'll be a link in the video or show notes of this podcast, depending what either you're listening or watching. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on notifications. If you have any questions about this, please put them in the comments section below, and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk